Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are really glad you're here because today we're tackling something that is, it's basically in the DNA of the modern movie industry, even if people don't realize it.
Oh, it's a topic just surrounded by
A
misconceptions.
huge misconceptions.
Yeah.
Today we're talking about the B movie, and I know exactly where your brain goes when I say that. You're picturing like a grainy black and white film.
A guy in a rubber lizard suit, maybe?
Yeah, stomping on a cardboard city, or maybe a flying saucer that looks suspiciously like a pie tin on a string.
The assumption is always that B stands for bad, or, bottom of the barrel.
Right. We use it as an insult.
Right.
That something is B grade, it's trash. But looking at the research we've pulled together, this comprehensive history, that definition is historically just completely wrong.
It wasn't a quality judgment at all.
No. It was a hard-nosed economic term.
And it was purely business. If you want to understand Hollywood, not the glitz, but the actual machinery of how it survived the 20th century, you have to understand the B movie, because this wasn't just a dumping ground for cheap films.
It was the R&D lab for the entire industry.
Exactly. The R&D lab.
And I love that.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this. If B doesn't mean bad, what did it originally mean? We have to go back to the 1930s for this, right?
Right. To get the B movie, you have to get inside the wallet of the average American during the Great Depression.
Which was pretty much empty.
Completely empty. People had very little disposable income. So if a family was going to spend a nickel, maybe a dime at the theater, they needed to feel like they were getting a huge return on that.
They wanted volume, quantity for their money.
Precisely. So these small neighborhood theaters, the slang for them was nabes. They couldn't just show one movie anymore. They had to offer a full program.
And this is where the double feature comes from.
This is the birth of the double feature. But it wasn't just two movies. The standard programming became this massive buffet, a newsreel,
To catch up on the news.
a cartoon for the kids, maybe a serial adventure episode like Flash Gordon, and then two feature films.
Talk about getting your money's worth.
And you had your main event, the A movie, that had the big stars, your Clark Gables, your Katharine Hepburns, and the big budget.
Okay.
And then to fill out the bill, you had the second feature, the B movie.
So strictly speaking, it just means second on the bill. But this is where the economics get really interesting to me. The difference wasn't just where they were on the marquee. It was about how the theater paid for them.
This is the crucial part. The A movie was rented on a percentage basis,
Meaning the studio gets a cut of the ticket sales.
a cut of every ticket sold. So if the A movie was a huge hit, the studio made a fortune. If it flopped,
It lost big.
exactly, high risk, high reward. But the B movie was different.
How so?
It was rented for a flat fee,
A flat fee.
a fixed price. The theater pays, say, $50 to show it for a week, and they keep all the ticket sales after that.
Okay.
For the studio, the profit was capped, but
Mm.
it was guaranteed.
As long as they kept their own budget super low.
That's the whole game. It becomes a simple math problem. If the rental fee guarantees you, say, $50,000, you just make damn sure you shoot the movie for $30,000.
So the B movie isn't art, it's a widget. A product designed to fill a time slot for a price.
That's it. And the major studios, like Warner Bros. And Fox, they had specific B units just to churn these things out. It was a literal assembly line.
And then there were the Poverty Row Studios. What a great name.
Oh, yeah. Places like Republic and Monogram, they didn't even make A movies. They only made B movies. And they were cranking out what they called quickies.
How quick are we talking?
We're talking about shooting an entire feature film in 4 days.
4 days. That sounds impossible.
It was intense. They reused scripts, costumes, they'd even reuse footage. A guy falls off a horse in a 1935 movie. You might see that exact same shot in a 1938 movie.
Waste not, want not. And speaking of horses, the main genre here was the Western, wasn't it?
Overwhelmingly. In the 30s and 40s, the B Western was the staple. This is where John Wayne cut his teeth. Before he was the Duke, he was just churning out dozens of these.
And you had series like The Three Musketeers.
Oh, play on Musketeers, yeah.
Yeah.
They were formulaic, sure, but they were efficient. But it wasn't just cowboys. This is one of the things I found most surprising, film noir.
Right. We think of film noir today as this high art, moody, stylish thing we study in film school.
Yeah.
But it has its roots deep in the B movie mud.
It absolutely does. And if you think about the constraints, it makes perfect sense. If you're a B-unit director, you have no money for fancy sets. Your walls look like cheap plywood. How do you hide that?
Okay, turn the lights off.
You use shadows. You use high contrast. You put a Venetian blind in front of your one light source and create those iconic bars of shadow. That moody look we call artistic was just a way to hide how cheap everything was.
That is the definition of creativity through limitation.
It is. Take a film like Stranger on the Third Floor from 1940. It's only 64 minutes long, a classic B runtime, but critics now say it's the first true film noir.
So the golden age was built on this.
Mm.
But then in the late 40s and early 50s, everything changes.
Yeah.
What happened?
A double whammy hit the industry. First, the government stepped in. There was a huge antitrust ruling in 1948 that banned block booking.
Okay, we should explain block booking. It sounds technical, but it's the engine of the whole system.
It really was. Basically, if a theater wanted the big A-list blockbuster, the studio would say, fine, but you also have to rent these 5 B movies from us to go with it.
They forced them to take the whole package.
Right, and once the Supreme Court banned that, theaters could just say, no thanks, we'll just take the hit. And the guaranteed market for all those cheap films just evaporated.
And the second part of that whammy,
The glowing box in everyone's living room. Television. TV was the B movie killer, or at least the killer of the old B movie. Why would you pay to see a formulaic Western when you could just stay home and watch Gunsmoke for free?
so the second feature starts to die. But the B movie doesn't disappear. It mutates. It finds a new habitat.
The drive-in.
The numbers here are just wild. In 1945, there were what, like 96 drive-ins in the U.S.?
Yep. By 1955, over 3,700.
That's an explosion.
A total explosion. And the audience shifted. It wasn't the family anymore. It was teenagers. And we have to be honest about the social dynamics of the drive-in.
They were called passion pits for a reason.
Exactly. The teens were there to hang out, to show off their cars, to make out. They were distracted viewers. They didn't want a complex drama.
You needed something loud and simple.
Loud, sensational, and simple. This is where we see the pivot from Westerns to atomic cinema. It's the Cold War. There's this fear of the bomb, of science gone wrong. So you get The Amazing Colossal Man.
A guy grows giant from radiation.
Or Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is actually a brilliant allegory for conformity.
It really is.
Yeah.
And to get people to the drive-ins, the studios got desperate. They started using gimmicks. This is the era of William Castle.
Oh, the king of the gimmick. For his movie Macabre, he offered a $1,000 insurance policy in case you died of fright.
That's marketing genius. Our movie is so scary, it's a liability.
And for The Tingler, a movie about a creature that feeds on fear, he installed buzzers called Percepto in some of the theater seats.
Buzzers in the seats.
They were surplus airplanes. And your seat starts vibrating.
I can only imagine the chaos.
It was a carnival. But there was also a business innovation happening thanks to a studio called AIP, American International Pictures.
Right. Samuel Arkoff and James Nicholson, what was their secret sauce?
They realized the old rental model was broken, so they packaged 2 of their own cheap genre films together, say, Day the World Ended and The Phantom from 10,000 Leagues, as a prepackaged double feature.
And because they provided the whole show.
They could demand a percentage of the box office, just like an A movie. They made A money on B budgets by targeting teens with titles like I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
Which brings us to a name that's basically synonymous with this whole era. The King of the Bees, Roger Corman.
Although, interestingly, he hated that title. Corman always said he never made a B movie because the traditional second feature was dead by the time he started. He preferred low-budget exploitation.
Whatever you call it, the man was a machine. What was that story? Monster from the ocean floor on a $12,000 budget.
And a 6-day shooting schedule. Corman was the master of efficiency. He'd shoot 2 movies back-to-back on the same set just to save money.
But his real legacy isn't just the penny pinching. It's the people he hired. The Corman Film School.
Oh, the alumni list is staggering. We're talking Jack Nicholson, Robert De Niro, Francis Ford Coppola, Jonathan Demme, James Cameron. They all got their start with Corman.
Why was he such a magnet for talent?
Well, he gave them a shot. But he also gave them freedom within constraints. He'd say, here's a camera, here's 20 grand, go make a movie. I don't care what you do, just make sure there's a monster and a girl, and it comes in on budget.
That's incredibly liberating for a young filmmaker.
It was the film school of the streets. You could experiment. If you failed, who cared? It was a cheap movie. But if you succeeded, you might just invent the future of Hollywood.
So as we move into the 60s and 70s, the content gets edgier. The old production code, the censorship, starts to crumble. And the B movie leans hard into exploitation.
This is where the definition shifts again. It's no longer about being low budget. It's about selling a specific sensation. Sex, violence, drugs, rebellion, stuff you couldn't see on TV.
And the subgenres got really specific. You had nudies, you had gore.
Right.
You had Russ Meyer with Faster, Pussycat, Kill, Kill. And then Herschel Gordon Lewis, the godfather of gore, he made Blood Feast in 1963. Before him, movies would cut away from the violence. Lewis zoomed in.
And the effects were not great. Oh, terrible. He used sheep organs from a butcher shop. But it was shocking. His marketing gimmick was handing out vomit bags.
Classic. But again, there's real cultural impact here. It wasn't just trash. Let's talk blaxploitation.
That started with Sweetback's Badass song?
By Melvin Van Peebles in 1971.
Yeah, and he partly funded it with a loan from Bill Cosby, which is a wild detail. The movie was rough, experimental, and a massive independent hit.
Why did it resonate so much?
Because for the first time, you had a black hero who beat the system. He wasn't a sidekick. He didn't die. It proved there was a huge, underserved African-American audience. And that launched Coffee and Foxy Brown with Pam Grier.
And the lines between A and B movies started to get really blurry here. Psycho.
Psycho is the perfect example. Hitchcock was the biggest director in the world, but the studio hated the idea. They thought it was trashy, so he shot it with his TV crew. Cheap, black and white. It looked like a B movie, but it made A movie money.
And then there's Night of the Living Dead.
George Romero makes that for $100,000 in Pittsburgh. And yeah, it's a zombie movie, but it's also a devastating critique of Vietnam, social collapse, racism. It proved you could hide deep, subversive ideas inside a B movie wrapper.
But the biggest bridge has to be Easy Rider.
Without a doubt. It started as an AIP biker movie idea, a standard exploitation genre, but it ended up getting released by Columbia Pictures. It cost next to nothing and made millions. It showed the big studios that these fringe subjects were actually mainstream.
And that realization, ironically, is kind of what killed the traditional B-movie industry.
It's the ultimate paradox. In the late 70s, the majors looked at what the B filmmakers were doing, creature features, space operas, and said, what if we just did that, but with an A-list budget?
Enter Jaws and Star Wars.
Exactly. Jaws is a monster movie. Star Wars is a space serial like Flash Gordon. Before 1975, this was B-level stuff. But Spielberg and Lucas turned them into the highest-grossing films in history.
So the blockbuster is just a B-movie on steroids.
That's the blockbuster takeover. Once the big studios started spending $50 million on Superman, how could the little guys compete? The audience didn't want a rubber monster anymore. They wanted the real thing.
But the B-movie didn't die. It just moved again. This time to our living rooms.
The home video revolution, the video store became the new NABE. You had companies like Empire Pictures and Troma just thriving on VHS.
Troma gave us The Toxic Avenger.
Which is really in that Z-movie category, films that are proud of being bad. Troma knew exactly who their audience was, the late-night cable crowd.
And that lineage continues today with studios like The Asylum.
Right. They mastered the mockbuster.
Mockbuster.
They release a movie that sounds just like a big Hollywood movie, so when Transformers comes out, they release Transmorphers.
This is just shameless.
It is, and it's profitable, but they also gave us Sharknado.
Sharknado is fascinating because it feels like a throwback to that William Castle gimmick era. It knows it's ridiculous.
It's a self-aware B movie. And with CGI, they can do these crazy creature features for nothing. They skipped theaters and went straight to cable and streaming.
You know, we've covered so much ground here, from Depression-era double bills to Sharknado. Looking back, what's the big takeaway? Why does the B-movie matter?
I think the key insight is that it was never really about cheapness. It was about freedom.
Yeah.
Because the financial stakes were so low, the creative risks could be high. It was the industry's R&D lab.
The R&D lab. I really like that.
Think about it. Lighting styles, sound techniques, new kinds of storytelling. Jack Nicholson learned how to act on a Corman set, not a Marvel set. B-movies tested the boundaries of taste and technology. When they found something that worked, like the slasher film, the A-list studios would swoop in, polish it, and sell it to the masses.
So the B-movies did the dirty work so the A-movies could shine.
Exactly. Without that chaotic, messy, low-budget training ground, American cinema would be incredibly boring.
So here's a thought to leave you with. We've talked about how the B-movie moved from theaters to drive-ins to VHS to cable. Today, we have YouTube. We have TikTok. We have content creators making videos on their phones for $0 that get millions of views.
The barrier to entry is lower than it has ever been in history.
Right. So is the B-movie dead? Or is that video you just watched of a kid doing a stunt in his backyard? Is that the modern equivalent? Maybe we're all just living in a 247 global double feature now.
That is a terrifying and fascinating thought.
That's all for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the flip side.